The HOA president's composure shattered as the detective recited the formal charges: mail fraud, attempted extortion, and repeated harassment. She barged onto my lawn, clutching a thick folder, insisting I immediately pay $80,000 in alleged overdue HOA assessments for a community I had never joined. 2 months later, she was the one cutting checks to her attorney. My name is Daniel Reeves, an industrial electrician who purchased a modest fixer-upper deliberately positioned just beyond the borders of Meadowbrook Estates because it lay outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The deed to my property states it clearly: not subject to Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association covenants or restrictions. That exemption was the primary reason I chose it: freedom from monthly dues and unnecessary conflicts. Then arrived Karen Stanton, the self-appointed monarch of the HOA. It began with small notices taped to my front door, polite reminders that HOA dues were $250 monthly. I disregarded them entirely. Next came registered mail, each envelope bulkier than the previous, piling on late charges, special levies, and compounded interest. By the 6th month, her calculations claimed I owed $80,000 in back fees, stretching all the way to before I even owned the home. When I chuckled and discarded the demand, she dispatched 2 collection representatives to my driveway. That Saturday morning unfolded like any typical weekend. I was installing new weather stripping around my garage door when a white sedan eased to a stop at the curb. 2 men in inexpensive suits emerged, each holding a clipboard. The taller one addressed me first, his voice carrying the rehearsed confidence of someone accustomed to intimidation. "Mr. Reeves, we've come about your delinquent balance with the Meadowbrook Estates HOA." I placed my screwdriver down deliberately. "I have no debt to the HOA. I'm not part of it." The shorter man rifled through his documents with exaggerated flair. "Our files indicate you owe $80,000 in accrued dues, fines, and interest." "Your files are mistaken," responded evenly. "This lot has never been inside the HOA boundaries." They shared a quick look. The tall one advanced a step. "Mrs. Stanton has directed us to commence asset appraisal should you decline to cooperate." I couldn't suppress a laugh. "Asset appraisal? So you're planning to linger on my land and estimate the value of my pickup?" I reached for my phone. "Perhaps I'll contact actual law enforcement, and we can talk about trespassing instead." They hurried back to their vehicle more quickly than I'd anticipated. As they sped away, I realized the situation had only intensified. Karen Stanton had moved from mere nuisance to something potentially illegal. The following week delivered constant aggravation. Karen appeared at my doorstep 3 separate times, each encounter more dramatic than the prior. The initial visit featured what could only be called her power outfit, a blazer from a bygone era, paired with a folder hefty enough to double as a blunt instrument. "Mr. Reeves," she declared, her tone laced with artificial kindness, "I'm only trying to assist you. Pay what's due, and we can prevent further complications." "Karen," I answered, mirroring her sweetness, "I've presented my deed to you. I've shown the plat map. My boundary sits 20 feet beyond your HOA limits." Her smile grew strained. "Everyone around here contributes their portion. You're no exception. In fact, per the recorded documents, I am precisely that, an exception, expressly omitted from your group." She exhaled sharply and retreated, her heels striking the concrete with forceful precision, yet I sensed her return was inevitable. The second appearance included reinforcements. She arrived with 2 fellow board members, Harold Finch and Deborah Lawson, positioned behind her like silent muscle as she brandished another sheaf of papers. "These are our governing bylaws," she proclaimed victoriously. "They explicitly cover all properties within a half-mile radius." I barely cracked the door. "Those bylaws cannot override recorded property law, Karen. My deed existed 15 years before your association formed." Harold edged closer, emptying menace despite his slight stature. "We retain legal counsel, you should know." "Congratulations," I replied, without emotion. "So do I." The third confrontation was quintessential Karen. She showed up solo at 7 o'clock a.m., hammering on my door as if serving a warrant. When I opened it, wearing my robe and holding fresh coffee, she trembled with barely contained fury. You believe you're smarter than everyone? She spat. I've managed this HOA for 12 years. I know every loophole there is. Evidently not the one involving accurate boundary verification, remarked, sipping my coffee. Her complexion shifted to a deep crimson. You'll settle every dollar, plus the additional fines I'm imposing for your defiance. Karen, the only expense I'll incur is a protective order if you continue these visits. She whirled around and stalked off, pausing only to yell back loudly enough for neighbors to hear. This matter is far from finished. She was correct, though not in her favor. Karen committed her gravest error by recording a lien against my title at the county office, swearing under penalty of perjury that I was a member in substantial arrears. I visited the clerk myself, armed with my deed, the official plat, and a 2003 recorded amendment that unmistakably carved out my parcel. The clerk's expression changed to surprise. She summoned a detective from the sheriff's department directly to the window. Detective Morrison was a straightforward woman in her 40s who examined paperwork as though it held critical evidence. She laid out my documents on the counter, then accessed Karen's lien submission on the terminal. She affirmed this under oath, the detective noted deliberately. It states she's operating as the HOA's authorized representative with complete awareness of the property's classification. Exactly the issue, I explained. She possesses that awareness. She knows full well I'm excluded. The detective's brows lifted. Can you demonstrate her knowledge? I grinned and produced my decisive evidence, a binder filled with emails, saved voicemails, and crucially, testimony from a 2010 boundary lawsuit where Karen had personally affirmed under oath which parcels fell outside the HOA, including my specific address. Detective Morrison's demeanor transitioned from detached curiosity to serious alarm. This is serious. If she knowingly submitted false instruments to the county recorder, that's a felony in the state, I concluded. Among other charges, Detective Morrison nodded gravely. I'm going to need copies of everything you brought. I was ready. I slid a thick envelope across the counter. She took it, then looked me in the eye. So what happens next? Next, she said, while organizing the stack, I'll have a conversation with Mrs. Stanton. They brought Karen in for a formal interview that same afternoon. She doubled down hard, claiming every lot with the Meadowbrook address, even those outside the recorded boundaries, automatically fell under HOA authority. Then Detective Morrison slid the 2010 boundary dispute transcript across the table, the one where Karen herself had testified under oath that my exact parcel was permanently excluded. That single document turned what she'd been calling a civil oversight into provable criminal fraud. I wasn't in the room, but Morrison phoned me later with barely concealed glee in her voice. She started off strong, insisting you were just another deadbeat trying to dodge your responsibilities. Then we put her own sworn testimony in front of her, went completely silent. Tried the "I forgot about that old case" defense next. Morrison snorted. Hard to forget when you personally mailed the man 47 demand letters over 8 months. 47? I only saved about 30. Turns out Karen brought her own complete set to prove proper notice. She basically gift-wrapped her harassment campaign for us. The following weeks moved fast. On a crisp Thursday morning, 2 sheriff's deputies arrested Karen on her front lawn in full view of half the cul-de-sac. Perfect timing. Everyone just happened to be walking their dogs. Harold Finch later told me she was still yelling, "This is a misunderstanding." While they cuffed her, the bail hearing was the next day. I skipped it, but the local paper didn't. Front page headline: HOA president charged with fraud over bogus $80,000 lien. My attorney, Patricia Kamar, was practically giddy. In 30 years, she told me, I've never had a defendant who kept such meticulous records of her own crimes. Every certified letter, every voicemail, every board minute entry admitting she was aggressively pursuing collection from the Reeves property despite known boundary issues. Known boundary issues. That's what she called not being in the HOA at all. Instead of me writing an $80,000 check, Karen got felony charges, and the fraudulent lien was expunged from my title in 6 days. I turned around and sued her civilly for harassment, slander of title, and emotional distress, The criminal trial lasted for days. The prosecutor laid out boxes of evidence, most of it Karen's own paperwork, and told the jury, the defendant has known since at least 2010 that Mr. Reeves's home is not part of the association. She swore to it in open court. Yet she waged an 8-month campaign of threats, fake collection agents, and finally, a fraudulent lien in an attempt to extort $80,000. Karen sat there in a drab cardigan instead of her signature power blazer, shaking her head like the evidence was some kind of mistake. When I testified, I kept it simple. I bought the house because it wasn't in the HOA, showed her the deed repeatedly, and she still threatened to take my home. The jury was back in 97 minutes. Guilty on every count: mail fraud, attempted extortion, and felony harassment. Her mouth actually fell open when the foreman read the verdict. She stared at me's I'd personally betrayed her. The civil case never made it to trial. Her homeowner's insurance paid part of my settlement before dropping her like a hot rock. The rest came out of her savings. She tried to take $80,000 from me and ended up handing me $50,000 instead. The absolute cherry on top was the emergency HOA meeting called to remove her as president. I wasn't invited, still not a member, but Harold called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. She showed up and tried to argue. She'd only been protecting property values. Someone in the back shouted, "By going to prison?" The vote to remove her was unanimous. Well, all but one. She voted no out of spite. Sentencing was 3 weeks later. The judge, visibly irritated by Karen's complete lack of remorse, gave her 18 months in federal prison on the mail fraud count, 3 years supervised release, and $30,000 in fines. When the gavel fell, Karen's face went slack. Her attorney had to grab her elbow to keep her from standing there muttering, but he owed the money. He owed the money. As they led her out in cuffs, some people never learn. I just mow my lawn in peace now, still HOA free.